We are recording on Thursday, December 4th, 2025 at 12:08 p.m. Eastern Time with Colonel Watkins and Brigadier General Holt as well as EM Burlingame. And it's EM's world. We're just living in it. And he made us wait for an hour like a bunch of idiots. And it was a total alpha power move, and I don't respect it on my own show. But beforehand we were talking about you know, Gladio and everything the CIA has done and, how it's not all evil. But I mean, they got, at the same time, they got a provable U.S. history of like, it's not one or two things, man. It seems to be the rule, not the exception. I'm also aware I have no background in intelligence and military. And okay, sure, it's probably easy for me to throw a stone into a glass house. But EM, could you kind of start this in the direction we want to push off? And for everybody listening, please go in the description. Please go follow our Twitters, all that good stuff.
Yeah. What's the reality of what we're seeing in the world? We're watching the disintegration and the fighting out of the Westphalian model of the world. And what is that Westphalian model? It is the nation state. And specifically, what does it mean, the nation state? Well, nation states under the Westphalian and in the English world, the Inglorious Revolution systems are and had the state had two enumerated powers. One was control of the exchequer, Treasury Department in the US, right? So control of your money supply. And the other one was the control of the use of violence, both in within your borders and then, intrastate and interstate, but in accordance with laws, right? The quote unquote rule of law. Okay, well, what are we watching right now? We're watching the disintegration of the Westphalian state and model because we now have the Devil's Legions, which are a global self-funding military intelligence capability tied into the banking systems and illicit trade and terrorism and everything else that far supersedes any power nation states has had. It plays nation states. And so, that's Operation Gladio. That's, that's taking a two-star General Galen, which you and I talked about the other day.
Reinhardt.
And when you stand up German, which is quite literally European intelligence in the early 1950s, you put him right back in there to run intelligence, just like the Nazis have been doing, just with a little few year window hiatus to, clean it up, dust off the dirt, and make it look good, right? Rebrand, right? It was a rebranding,
It's like Blackwater going to XE. It's like we're just
right?
hey, doing the Nazi thing. We're gonna
Yeah,
throw that
yeah,
out. We
yeah,
got
yeah.
this new idea though.
Yeah, we're going to go quiet. We're going to keep killing people, but we're going to go quiet for a few years as we rebrand and crisis messaging. So, I defer to, the colonel on Operation Gladio and the details of these other things, very much so. But, this is what we're dealing with right now. We have a global super organization in the form of rogue intelligence agencies, which aren't rogue, they're Praetorians. They're quite literally the Roman Praetorian system. And the Russians have thrown them off and have to continue to do that. The Chinese are throwing them off and are having to continue to do that. The Persians have been trying to, but unfortunately, was put right there to be a constant threat to the Arabs and the Persians. They're finally doing it now, and now it's coming back home. We're going to have to get rid of these guys. So I'll stop there, let the colonel or the general step in.
I could not have said that better myself. And just to further your point of Galen's role, and that was kind of my wake up moment,
Mm,
having spent my career in the military
mm,
and attending formal professional military education.
mm.
I spent a year at Air War College, and we are indoctrinated into the approved history of all of this information. When you start reading independent sources outside of the approved military education, you quickly find out that just about everything you ever learned is a lie.
Yes.
And you go back to, I had no idea until I started 3 years ago focusing on Operation Gladio. And I refer to the Devil's entity as the International Syndicate, just because it's a term that I because it's a criminal syndicate. It is
It's
an
the mob
organization.
state. Yeah.
Yes,
Sorry,
that
Douglas Valentine, the CIA's organized crime. I've had him on here for that book, and it's the best way to frame it. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah.
yeah, and I've read several of his books. He does an amazing job. The book that he wrote about the Phoenix program.
Phoenix program, yeah,
Yeah,
I've had him on for all of those.
and it illustrates, and I've said this repeatedly, if you look at what's going on in the United States right now, it's a modern day version of the Phoenix program. If
Yes.
you look at Operation Condor, that was prolific throughout Latin America, it was another Phoenix program where they gather up people, they kidnap them. And I'm not suggesting ICE is kidnapping people, so don't misunderstand me. But they certainly did this with January 6th, and they isolate them. And in the case of Condor and Gladio, they took them to black sites and actually executed them. But before they executed them, they tortured them. And so, because it is done so many times, they've accumulated a lot of experience on exactly how to control psychologically people without physically having to kidnap them. And I feel like that's what we're experiencing right now with all of the propaganda that's going around inside the United States.
Well, look at that also with what was and still is, and it just went out the other side of my head. What's the base there in Cuba?
Guantanamo.
Guantanamo.
Right?
Guantanamo.
That, what did we do in Guantanamo? We take people, depending, I was an interrogator for a while. You have the different approaches. You don't approach everybody the same. You don't torture some people. Some people you treat nice. Some people you treat well. Some people you commiserate with, right? And then what do? Well, you keep them there for 3-4 years. You get inside their head. You warp and shift the narrative. And the ones that get it, you release them back out into the world where they come from. And you help promote them back up in the terrorist organization or the criminal organization they came from.
And isn't that interesting? Because we were just talking about that last night, the whole refugee thing that we're seeing
Yeah.
orchestrated right now. What most people don't realize is the CIA's operating procedure, and it's best illustrated, I think, in modern times with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, where they basically fund and train these people to do evil things. And then they export that terrorism where they need it. They exported Mujahideen into Chechnya, into Bosnia,
Right.
all over the world.
Dagestan. Yeah.
And then what do you do when the Taliban comes back into control of Afghanistan? Well, you have your agents, i.e. the Mujahideen, that some of the ones that you spend a lot of money on and are very good, you do not want to leave them in Afghanistan. So you refugee them into the United States. We did that with the Cuban exiles. The Cuban exiles was probably, I refer to them as our own Gladio. They ignited car bombs in Washington, D.C., killing a former Chilean ambassador and his aide, which was a U.S. citizen. They annihilated Miami. There were dead bodies laying everywhere at the orchestrations. They bombed airplanes. And those were all skills taught to them by the CIA. So they bring these terrorists back and put them in your communities, and they can be activated at any time.
That's right. So visually, let's go back to this hit on the two guardsmen with the Afghan who drove 3,000 miles to go get that done. And, the cover story is, well, he was radicalized, random act of violence. No, nothing random about it. And so I want to take you back to the fall of Kabul. I had a lot of people that used to work for me there on scene when that was going down. A lot of folks I was helping at the time, we're talking about Task Force Pineapple, Argo, Nazarene, and the like. But then what happens while I'm trying to get this specific family out in coordination with others? And they're standing in their own sewage outside the Abbey Gate in a ditch, and they've been there for days. Here come 3 black buses, and they're all blacked out. And they open the Abbey Gate, and they just go right on through. and they go right up to the back of a C-17, my jet, and they all start getting on. Well, everybody's raising hell. Even our own Air Force people going, what the hell's that? And they're saying the state and the CIA people are patting them on the head saying they've already been vetted. Don't you worry about it. It's none of your business.
Right.
And so there is your we have to get these people out plan because this is their Easter eggs that they plant. Well, now it's gotten so much worse because here comes what I think is a very just war. The three of you may disagree, but I view President Trump's offensive or the cartel operations as the bottom foundational Jenga block to everything. And while drugs may be the legal cover for this action, this is getting them very riled up. And what I want to try to tell Americans is as we put that pressure on, as that pressure goes against the bad guys, including the deep staters and the CIA and the MI6ers and the Mossaders, they're going to respond back. And they have cartel, Hezbollah, and every terror organization represented on every main street in America. And so it's a cauldron. And what I think I see this Afghan hit on these two guardsmen as is a very visual activation that was done to kick things off. And I'll finish here. That's my little one. I will finish with this. I also am a former inmate of the Air War College, like you, Roxanne. And in my case, I was a full bird at the time I was there, and in my case, nothing added up. And I was reading. I actually was doing the reading, which was probably a very bad idea. So some of their civilian professors, the young ones who were the PhDs who were there to take us to task, they actually were spouting history wrong. They were giving out wrong information. I took them to task on it. And then I found myself, for a very small offense where you're supposed to have academic freedom anyway, right up there in the 3 Stars office, the commandant of Air War College, and he's kicking me out of the school as an '06.
What?
Yeah, he's like, we will allow you to graduate. You're going to have limited time over here. You'll be able to take these courses, but you're going to go onto the other side of the campus and you'll be in a special studies program. And so I'm like, all right, well, I don't know what the hell's going on here. I go show up at that program and this is the land of broken toys.
I didn't know the Air Force had short buses.
Yeah, we had a short bus. They put me on the short bus that afternoon. And so I go over to the land of broken toys with a different civilian PhD. And we're now all involved in the future studies for the chief and the secretary, evaluating technologies and viable scenarios for a 25-year deep look. And I came to find out that we all had the same problem. We were all critical thinkers. And we had challenged it, and it was like, well, what are you in for? Oh, I'm in for this. Oh. So it actually ended up being a much more enjoyable year as a result of being kicked out because it happened within 3 weeks of arrival. But to your point, they take their narratives and their indoctrination of the officer corps extremely seriously.
Yes.
They do.
And when I was there, and this is so important to this conversation, I saw it completely. And the defensiveness, if you challenge this, we're here to teach critical thinking. I know how to critically think. I don't need to be taught how to critically think. No, you don't yet, but you will be taught. And it's like, no, I know how to critically think. I think this is a stupid program. And that's where we end up. I actually fingered in the Chinese studies program, the professor there who was a mainland China guy. It was obvious to me after our trip to China that he was not working for our team. And it wasn't till 10 years later that he was arrested. He's still serving time. So I'll stop right there. But it's a mess.
So I've written a couple of pieces on how the quote unquote global war on terror was a mob war.
Right.
And it used the last, and I'm just say it bluntly, but the last white martial power of the West to go take over the non-aligned, non-controlled terrorist and criminal organizations of the entire world. Everybody's looking at Iraq and Afghanistan, but we were in 125 countries at the same damn time doing this all over. And so what happened? The Devil's Legions and their Praetorian masters were taking under control all of the world's illicit funding lines, all of the manpower, and the ones that were good, very much, Colonel, to what you were saying, they hired. And the ones that weren't good, we killed. And we, cleaned up their little local mob wars and put them all under, the heads of the five, their own local heads of the five families, shall we say. That's what the GWAT was. It was 125 or a 25, 27-year mob war where we used our last true martial capacities as a peoples, European and English speaking peoples, to take over on behalf of the Praetorians all of the criminal and terrorist organizations of the world, all the funding lines, all the manpower, all the recruiting, all the logistics, all the supply, all of the auxiliaries, undergrounds, guerrillas, all of that kind of stuff, and put it all under the control of, bring it all together as a single organization. You call the crime syndicate, I call the Devil's Legions, and put it all under the control of the offshore banks. The offshore banks are the ones that actually control the criminal cartels and criminal organizations, because somebody said this the other day, I can't remember who it was, and they were absolutely right. Who determines who's the head of a cartel? It's not the CIA. It's a CIA cutout, but it's a bank. Because
Right.
whoever gets to sign off on the money, right? Who gets to sign as a signatory on the laundered money is the head of the cartel. Who picks that? The banks.
Mm-hmm.
We now, in my lifetime, in my adult lifetime, actually, in the last 30 years, we went from roughly $19 trillion in offshore wealth in the spider's web to somewhere around 140 today. Virtually all of the world's real wealth is now offshore, and they have control of it.
Right.
The Praetorians, right? The second virtualized Rome, because that's who it is.
That's why I have problems with the current narrative that was recently discussed, not ironically from a CIA agent, saying that Venezuela has like the richest, they have all of these trillionaires that are
Yeah.
controlling this. It just was laughable to me if you understand the breadth of this organization, that someone could actually say that out loud and not be laughed at.
Yeah.
No, well, it's the modern variant. If it's the Rothschilds are the wealthiest people, the most powerful people on earth.
Right.
It's not true. It's the
No.
same. It's the same straw man, or well, I think it's a straw man, right? But the thing we need to be careful of is not just point the CIA. The CIA is the second youngest child of the family. The youngest child is the Mossad, right?
Correct.
The oldest, the oldest sibling, shall we say, is the old Roman Praetorians who escaped to Venice and then Amsterdam, then City of London, etc. So, what is it? Special Operations Executive, and I've written on this here recently. The Special Operations Executive is what birthed all of this in its modern form.
Correct.
But what did that do in the guise of World War II is it brought all of these entities together under a single roof that then we chartered in 1947 in the US as the CIA, the rechartering of MI6, the rechartering of MI5, which was actually older, the rechartering, reorientation of the FBI here in the U.S., but then also German BDU and German internal intelligence and French and all of that, what we would call the Five Eyes today plus,
Yeah,
right?
the good
Five
guys.
Eyes plus, the good guys. All of that was brought under, this old Praetorian system was all brought together in during World War II, and then chartered in the various forms in the different nation, quote unquote nation states, right? Because again, remember the Marshall Plan was the way that they funded the intelligence apparatus. That's how, because it was like 6 or 7% of funds had to go directly to Intel, right? For security reasons, anti-communist reasons.
Covert
Covert.
line of the Marshall Plan. Yes.
Correct. So, when we say CIA, yes, it's important because that's here, us Americans, right?
Correct.
MI6, Mossad, but again, the CIA and the Mossad are just the two youngest siblings in the family. The
Correct.
MI6 is older. The Dutch, I don't even know what the hell to call the Dutch, but the Hague, shall we say, are the older, and then the Venetians and the Romans before that. This all goes back all the way,
Correct.
But
right?
I think we're at the a lot of times we misjudge these wars as, well, this is the war to end all wars. This is for all the marbles. I think this one is. I think this one is for all the marbles. I see a lot of the plates, they're willing to expose themselves more than I think they ever have. They're willing to, let's just take one case, Keir Starmer. He is not caring what things look like. He just canceled 4 mayoral elections so that the Reform Party has zero chance. They're locking up people hand over fist against the Charter of Rights. They absolutely could care less. You now have NATO boss Dragone, the admiral, calling for a preemptive strike on Russia. You've got the foreign minister of Germany today that said if countries won't support Ukraine, well then we're going to go directly to war with Russia. Of course, that's a fantasy dream because none of them have more than a few soldiers and a dog named Rex, and they think that they can suck us into it, and maybe they can with a false flag. But I guess where I get nervous is during the entire Cold War, and before that, really, all of these things that you're talking about, EM, had a veneer or a camouflage over them. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
just,
Yes.
you can go read the SDG goals in the UN guide or the Great Reset book all for yourself. It's right there in your face.
Yeah. They have to take us through step 7. Okay. So virtually all of that, this is ATOL, everybody.
Much quieter than my Cavalier, by the way.
um, that $100 trillion, 140 trillion or so in offshore wealth is all artificial.
Hmm.
It's derivative. They have to actually take the physical assets that those derivatives are based on for any of that to be real. And what does that require? A total and absolute collapse of the entire West. And now they're openly moving. And they put it under, carbon, carbon issues and the planet, and they put it under, compassion and, refugees and all of this other stuff. But in reality, in order for the 140 trillion that they've stolen just since World War II, and I wrote a piece this morning called, because it hit me really hard this morning. I realized we have just lost an 80-year war. We have been at war since World War II, all over the world, and
Hmm.
we lost, and the East won, despite everything we've thrown at them.
Hmm.
Okay, well, in order to keep that $140 trillion real, they no longer can conquer the East and steal their assets to make it real. Now they have to collapse the West in order to take the physical assets so that they don't, at a certain point, you have to roll over all of the debt, right? You have to
Hmm.
reset all of the derivatives, and you need massive amounts of real collateral. Well, what is that collateral now that they're not going to get Russia, and they're not going to get China, and they're not going to get Central Asia, and they're not going to get the Middle East? The only assets they have left are the assets primarily of the English speaking peoples, the assets in Australia, because Europe has no
This
real
is why Larry
assets.
Fink says we're going to tokenize everything.
It's tokenize everything, right?
Yeah.
So they want all of the lands of the so where are the natural resources in the world? North America, Australia, Africa's off the table, right? Because the Africans are starting to stand up, and we don't have the martial power. And unfortunately, all of the non-Western peoples that are flooding into our countries are never going to fight the way we did for these lands and for foreigners, et cetera. They wouldn't even do it in their own damn countries. They wouldn't even fight for their own damn countries in their own damn countries. Do we think we're going to get them to fight our wars overseas? Get the F out of here. So the point being is that they have to move to step 7 of the financialist kill chain now that we've lost the 80 years war. And remember what came out of the original 80 years war? The Peace of Westphalia. Peace of Westphalia, which is what put this mob system in place.
That's right.
So that's very interesting. from this whole perspective
Mm,
that I've been looking into, and it makes it make a whole lot more sense.
mm.
I think that there are still a few. It's like the cat hanging on to the tree branch that thinks they still have a chance of capturing Russia. And I think that's what we were just talking about, where they've brought it all out in the open. And I think this desperateness is what has pulled back the veil. For the last remaining ones of them who are still invested in this. And I think the exposure has pushed them into not doing it as subtly as they had been in the past.
I don't think they can take Russia. I don't believe that. I think what they think is they can suck the United States into
Yeah.
another war in
Oh,
Europe,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? And you know that they think that they can make us go Nazi, hard ethno-nationalist, kill all the brown people.
Hmm.
And we're going to have to kick millions of tens of millions, maybe a couple 100 million brown people out of our countries. That's just a fact. And it's not their fault. We don't have to hate them. We don't have to be angry with them. We don't have to, put them in death camps and all of that stuff. In fact, we need
Right.
to not be doing that because it will ruin us, but they have to go. But they think that they can drive us into a place to where we go hard Nazi, hard frickin'
You
ethno-nationalist
can actually
slaughter.
see that happening.
Right. Well, and what's this Fuentes dude? And why did they kill Charlie Kirk? Because he's the one moderate who would have said, yes, stand and do what you got to do, but don't go too far. He was the moderate,
Yeah.
right? Young men, be strong, be capable, stand up for your people, but don't go that far. He was the one voice saying that, so they had to kill the moderate. And now you got this Groiper or whatever the hell. I don't even know
I
what the
think
hell
he's
that
like the
means.
innocent kid who walked in on the crime scene and went, "Uh-oh," and they saw him
Yeah.
see it. They saw him
Yeah.
see it and they went, "Well,
Awesome.
Charlie, we liked you."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mena,
But that
Arkansas.
history is replete with people who have created grassroots efforts to coalesce people. One of the people that I found in my research was a guy who everybody was taught to hate by the name of Fred Hampton in creating the Rainbow Coalition, which was basically poor people of all colors coalescing around a movement. And what did they do? They assassinated them.
Yeah.
Anybody that brings the different groups and proves that racism isn't the thing to wrap your flag around, that there are principles that are at play here, are immediately on the assassination list.
Okay, so to that, Colonel, look at 2019, 2020 under the guise of the BLM riots, et cetera. Look at how many black elder, mostly male black elder community leaders were assassinated and killed. Some of them broad daylight,
Yeah,
right? That was the Charlie Kirk, the old man Charlie Kirks of the black community. And
yeah,
then
they
what's happened to the
don't just work
rhetoric since
together.
then? It's just gone anti-white. It's gone, right?
Yeah, they don't want us working together.
No, no. Now, this is a little different, right? So, our native black populations, Hispanic population, they've been here a long time. There are people, right? What I'm talking about is the folks that have been intentionally hundreds of millions, if you take in Europe, United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, et cetera, and the United States, have been forced, dropped into our countries without any willingness, desire, permission, or anything from the people who live here. And it's
Well,
still
they
happening.
all have a common denominator that they're culturally resistant. They come here with, "Oh, I'm not going to assimilate. I'm here to
I don't
overtake."
I don't even care about that. Forgive me, sir, but this is an argument we need to not chase because that's the estrogens argument, right? It's a
It's not an
framing.
argument to chase. It's just it's a notable
Well,
symptom.
it's true, but if we chase that, we're missing the underlying point, which is these people must go because
Oh, I totally agree.
we the people of these lands, we who are the economy, we who are the lands,
Hmm.
we did not invite these people here. We did not want these people here. This was done without our will. It's the same thing if I have a party, a nice party, and somebody brings in guests that I don't want there. I have absolutely every right to kick them out of my house.
You do. And
Forget any of the
The
arguments that
United
they're
States is
nice or they're having a good conversation. No, 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 no. Somebody brought people to my house to a party that I didn't want there.
I get it, but
Yeah, yeah.
right now I view the United States as the only country in the mix having even a chance of ejecting these people.
Well, on our own, yes, I agree. on our own. And we need to do it not going hard ethno-nationalist, hard Nazi, right? These people are as much victims. And that's the other thing. You can be, the people could have been in my house, have been partying, could have been nice, could have been okay, but you weren't invited. You need to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to violently throw you out. I'm just going to say, hey, you need to leave. And if you choose to use violence, well, I will use violence, right? I will. But I'm not going to lead with that. I'm just going to say, hey, I'm sorry. You weren't invited to this party. You don't belong here. You shouldn't be here. I'm sorry that somebody brought you here like that. Please go have a good time. And maybe I can invite you back at another time, but we're full.
And let me just kind of put an explanation point on that, because I recently read this book called Covert Networks, and it's about the International Rescue Committee. And
good.
the International Rescue Committee,
they're a hot mess.
It's basically a front for the CIA. The ties that go back into this organization, and of course it's attached to the UN, goes back, and it predates World War II. And these are the people, to your point when you were talking about being the aircraft commander, and these black buses pull up.
Right.
These are the people that work with the CIA to vet those people to get on those black buses. Right. And they do it in all of these countries. These people that are being pushed into America, Europe, Australia, Canada, they're being pushed here on purpose.
Yes.
They have designated locations that they settle them in for reasons.
Yes.
And it's to take over very critical areas within a country that they're able then to shape the outcome of the country. We see that playing out in Minneapolis right now. But that's not the first one. I told you, the Cuban exiles controlled the entire political system in southern Florida. You saw it with the people that we brought in from Laos after we used Laos as a supply of opium for over a decade. The Laotian kids that were born in, a large portion of them were settled in San Francisco. All you have to do is research Laotian gangs in San Francisco, and they've taken over. And so these are very targeted and screened people that are being injected into our country. And to Am's point, they need to be removed.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because if you go back to the 4 years of the borders being open, you have this thing called the Swift flights. So there's different categories of folks coming across. You walk across, you're just a foot soldier, and you're going to gum up the works and good, go make problems for ICE. But if you were jumping on a Swift jet, your passport, your ethnicity, your identity, we knew who you were, or the bad guys knew who they were, and they put them at specific airports, specific routes, Westchester, New York, San Francisco. And this is where what we'll call polystab units, your political stability units, actually are being intentionally placed. And so my thing, if I could advise the powers that be that are interested in rolling this back, you got to get after the people who were passengers on Swift flights. Those are your problems. That's where your activations are going to be. And I think every single time you tap one of those, you'll find something that was potentially very dangerous to our country.
So go back to Rome, ancient Rome.
I'm there, man.
This is what Rome did. See, Rome didn't control the empire with all these legions. There's no possible way they could have had enough legions to do that. They only used the legions to conquer or reconquer areas. What Rome did is it moved these types of people around in the empire under all kinds of arguments to do, and there's three classes here of these types of, forced, rehabilitations. One is, the criminal types, the ones that are going to do the violence. And the Laotians are not actually San Francisco, it's Richmond, just across the bridge. I come from that area, and I might know some of those folks. I might have been engaged to one of those girls. Beautiful. That shit. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Give me a second. So one is the criminal organizations, right, to disrupt, introduce criminality. And that specifically is oriented towards lowering trust, right? Safety, security, trust, when in rural communities you have to start locking your door, your community is fundamentally changed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The second ones are the ones that come in and economically and politically disrupt, they're functional. They're not criminal. They take jobs and they work and they're fairly good employees, and they specifically though tend to get into management and the both public and private management and government's management, right? And so they tend to rise up into those systems, and then what happens is they disrupt the native citizens in management and government positions, and then therefore they have a disproportionate voice in the economics and social movements and investments and all of that in the community. The third one are high level folks, and they put them, these are well educated people, often well educated in England or in Ivy League schools,
Yes.
right? So they have all the credentials, and then they're put into, senior government positions, into all, the financial institutions, into corporations, into all these things. So they,
Judges.
right? So they exactly, yeah, foreign-born judges. So what do? What they bring all three classes in to work independently, but as a whole. And so while you might focus on the criminal elements, you're not paying attention to they're already infiltrating over here, they're controlling over here. And while you look at that and you go, wow, why are these people here? Well, then you're not paying attention to, well, who's the one funding all of that?
Right.
And legitimate funding, by the way, not black ops funding, but, somebody working as a managing director of BlackRock that's making sure that certain communities are through certain families, foreign families are getting funded, getting backed, getting supported such that they have a disproportionate, it's again, how does the British system works? It works through the utilization of funds to determine who sits on what board. And then by sitting on that board, public sector and private sector and for-profit and not-for-profit, you determine who gets into leadership positions in corporations, in government, in judicial system, et cetera, who gets funding for the jobs, little businesses, et cetera, that create the middle class. It's how it's done. This is Rome. This is exactly what Rome did in the Roman Empire. Exactly. And we're 2,000 years on from when, Rome was really doing this. Eastern Europe was what hit with this the hardest, because Eastern Europe was always a trouble for the Romans. Right? It was always a northern threat for the Romans. And so what they do, they move peoples from the eastern part of the empire, who would later go on to be Muslims, etc., and they mix these populations. Eastern Europe is a tinderbox to this day.
Yeah.
That's what they're setting up here. What they're setting up is not just the steal and theft, but they're setting up a 2,000-year tinderbox.
Well, this gets to my point that I think they're drawing the lines for their big end game. And everything that they have pegged out there in all of their writings has been about 2030. And we're in the playbook and we're in the milestones and we're watching it play out. But what we look, I think we're doing a great job, and a lot of people are waking up, but they're waking up really slowly. And even the folks that I get to talk to on the administration team sometime, when I'm here to remind them that it's a team sport, and we would do better if the boss had a couple of more loyal members on his team, that there's not really a lot of margin for error here with only 3 years left on the shot clock. We got to get going, and I would advise much more aggressive action along the lines that he's playing.
I think, sir, that the aggressive action has, so everything that's real, that's really happening is happening at the local levels all around the country.
I agree.
And there's only so much that, I'm going to use language I understand, right? There's only so much the king can do.
Mm-hmm.
The king's away and, fighting sport of kings, right? He's playing the sport of kings. The dukes and the earls and the barons and the viscounts and the marquises and the counts and all of that, they've got to get their S together and start focusing on the small and local areas. And I think the initial problem, and this is a lot of the writing I do, and you and I have talked this, personally, we don't know who those local leaders are right now.
Right.
And in a lot of these communities, it's absentee lords, because the most influential person in that community might not even live there. They're just the biggest investor in that community for properties, and they're the biggest impact on the local tax base, but they don't live there.
Right. That's
right.
True. It's very
And
true.
so we have some serious, serious problems because of this financialist system and these absentee landlords, right? Absentee lords, shall we say. And we've got to address that. And as you say, Blaine, we've got very little time to work out who is the real top dog in a community. And it ain't
Hmm.
government,
Right.
right?
No, that's right.
And a lot of these people, a lot of these wealthy people, I talked to them for years and years, some of the very wealthiest people in the world, they all have this misapprobation that their 6 Navy SEALs are going to be able to save
I
them
know.
in a
You and I
collapse,
have chatted that one up.
right? And
I'm
it's
covered.
like,
I got SEALs. Yeah,
I
no,
got
they're your
SEALs and
assassins.
I got a compound out in Idaho, or I got a
Yeah,
compound in Wyoming. It's like, well, first off, good luck getting there. Second off, good luck holding it without an army. And that
yeah.
army is always the local communities.
Well, it sounds like the compound belongs to the SEALs.
Well, the SEALs won't want it, by the way, because the SEALs know, and this even the SEALs, right?
They have to defend it.
To tease with my SEAL buddies, right? But even the SEALs, when
Yeah,
they have those few lucid moments between book deals and hair product sales, they realize I can't hold that, right? I
yeah.
can't hold it. I don't
So
have the manpower to hold it.
my
Yeah.
year with the dark ones at in residence at the Council on Foreign Relations, if there's one thing that I definitely walked away with in my notebook as an observation is these folks, their hubris, their egos, their money, their power,
Or ignorance. Yeah.
well, that too,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
only thing that impresses them is when their rice bowls are threatened, and that's it. If their rice bowls are threatened or their lineage is threatened, now you've got their attention. And so to get to what you're saying, EM, about local lords and even those who are not living in residence with their communities, it's impressing upon their rice bowls that you are now threatened. Your part of these riches is now in question. I think that's where you start to muddy it up for them. And as
Well,
obtuse as an idea as it sounds, I think that's the path.
I don't disagree that the problem is that we have these tech lords running around with their new computationalist religion,
Yeah,
convincing us all that we're going to be kumbaya
right.
because of AI. And, what are we really looking at right now? To your point about the rice bowls, we're looking at about $30 trillion in wealth getting wiped out when this AI bubble pops.
Yeah,
And it's
correct.
going to pop. Now they're going to drag
Soon,
it on.
very
They'll put
soon.
$3 trillion a year into the illusion of it
Yeah,
to keep it going as long as they can. But the problem is that this techno-feudalist utopia is actually thermodynamically and energetically impossible.
yeah,
And we're figuring that out, right? And so the vast amount of these people, the people that we're talking about, a vast amount of their wealth is in these artificial things. And most of them have made their wealth in a period of time that they've never had to build anything real. Or they did build something real that was modestly very successful, and then they turned that money over to BlackRock or they turned that money over to Goldman Sachs, and it grew ludicrously.
yeah. That's
But
right.
that growth, all of that growth there is all artificial. And so we wind up coming back to the work the Colonel's doing and the things that she's mapping out of, okay, when you're in these types of situations, who's already deeply embedded and how did these Operation Gladio folks self-fund and become so powerful at the end of World War II? Well, they did it through a collapse.
Hmm.
They were already embedded. And they understood, they never chased the higher abstraction levels, artificial derivative wealth. They took mob style control of revenue streams and hard assets and populations.
And what's interesting about that is the when you follow the money of that organization in turning all of the illicit activity, which they ended up controlling
Yeah,
around the world, as you
yeah,
pointed out, they bring that wealth and invest it in hard assets
yes,
through the money laundering. I just recently, this journey has been so fascinating for me because a lot of it I lived in the 1980s with the collapse of the savings and loan. I just recently read the correlation between the CIA, the mafia, and George H.W. Bush in
Hmm.
the controlled collapse, which is what it ended up being, of the savings and loan that happened simultaneously with Iran Contra because they were running all
Yeah.
of that
That's right.
illicit money.
That's it.
Yes.
Yes. And
Yes.
I never put the two together. And I lived
Yes.
both of them. I lived in Los Angeles in the 80s when they were bringing in all of the cocaine.
Yeah,
And
crack.
I lived through the savings and loan collapse. I never put the two together. And once you understand that all of the assets that these people were buying up, like the Michener, the one guy in Houston, he owned 12% of Belize.
Yeah.
He went out there and bought 12% of the country.
Yes.
That's right.
It's crazy.
So here's the issue that we have, right? And I've written about this as well. The mob state. Mob state didn't start in 1947 with chartering the CIA. It started in 1919, I think. When did prohibition go into effect?
I was just gonna. You just beat me to it, brother.
That's where the mob state began, because what we realized. What we realized is by about 1924 is you didn't need an actual real economy. You needed the appearance of a real economy to cover for the illicit trade. Why? Yes. Because you then didn't have to have business knowledge, competitiveness, et cetera. You just had to have violence. Right. And then you can buy judges, you can buy regulators, you can buy politicians, you can buy. Meyer Lansky was the genius behind it. Not the only one. Don't take away. Luciano was, yes, he was a muscle, but he was a brilliant man. Luciano was a brilliant man.
But what you're painting is the thread. So you can run that thread. So all what the way happened? Through the Jekyll Island 6, Myron Lansky, the Bronfmans, and it puts us into the desert, eating crappy food, killing people we don't want to kill.
It created Hollywood specifically to reputation wash the mob, because what were the early real successful movies? They were all mob movies.
Yes.
Right? Remember? The first major actors were, Cagney and all the other guys. They were all playing mobsters.
All mobsters.
We got to normalize this.
Right.
We got to normalize this. Got to make it normal.
So that's what's been happening. The U.S. American economy died in the 19-teens, 1920s, and we transitioned to this illicit funding system, this British system, because that's what they do, right? And then everything else has been an illusion. All asset valuations that we've had specifically since 1971 are all because of mob money washed through the banks. That then comes out and buys assets at inflated prices. The inflated assets are then used as collateral for further lending, which then goes into, an increasing welfare state, and the increasing amount of money in the welfare state and those driven into the welfare state because there isn't an underlying actual economy. That an ever increasing amount of that goes into illicit business.
So tell me about the war on the cartels and rice bowls, because when you look at the swamp and all these swamp creatures on both sides of the aisle, by the way, there is no aisle, complaining and protesting and trying to defend drug runners. It's like, well, hey, how about we flip that and examine your motivations and where your money comes from?
Or let's rebrand you as the actual drug runners.
Exactly. I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
And not just the drug runners, but the human runners. And then there's all kinds of, the thing that people also need to understand is that the largest fraud by far, the largest illicit funding lines by far, orders of magnitude, is not trafficking. That's just the cash. Right. That's the cash liquidity. The illicit funding in the order of trillions of dollars a year is the markets. It's these artificial IPOs. It's these business. It's the AI bubble. That's made tens of trillions of dollars for people. It'll all collapse. It'll leave it on us. Right now, everything they're doing is trying to get a $30 trillion bailout, and we won't do it directly, but we might do a new Manhattan project, and we might put 30 billion in that because we need to be competitive in the world, and that's what it's going to take.
Well, 30 billion and 30 trillion is a lot different.
30 trillion, excuse me. Yeah, 30 trillion.
Yeah, there you go.
Right? So, the biggest theft by far is all done through the markets, and all of this, vast, so we went from price to earnings ratios when I was a young analyst back in the early 2000s. We went from price to earnings of about 12 to 17, maybe 25, depending on what you were in. We're up to 700 in some cases now. That's just pure fiction. Pure fiction.
Yeah.
Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars are made every year off just this fiction of markets.
That's
And
right.
everything that sustains that is the fiction of an economy. And what sustains that is this $2 trillion of cash, $2 trillion a year in cash that's pumped in from trafficking.
That's why they have to have this war they want so bad.
That's exactly right. To mask and hide everything, reset, right? And they can't get their World War III because turns out Russian civilization is pretty damn good. And they just demonstrated we'll kill 2 million people in a couple of years to protect our land. Try and take on the Chinese. They'll spend 200 million people if they need to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Right? Like China thinks they won the Korean War.
I know.
They lost something between 4 and 12 million people. We lost 50, 52, something like that,
Yeah.
right? The Chinese still consider it a win. Why? We had to do an armistice, not even a peace agreement. We had to
Well, the land
do
didn't change. That's what the Chinese were after.
That's exactly right.
Real
Chinese
action.
are like, "Pfft." So you think we're going to, now they got 1.3 billion people. You think they won't spend 200 million people fighting for China?
Easily.
Get the, right?
Yep.
Same with the Persians and the Central Asians, et cetera. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, so
I see you took out the Three Gorges Dam. Well, now we're mad.
now we're mad. Okay.
Right.
Right. And we don't have to nuke you. We'll hit you with hypersonics and we'll take all your cities out anyways. So, right. And your fancy little boats and their entire carrier groups, right? We'll use one Orezhnik. Do you ever think about why when they tested the Orezhnik, it had something like 36 warheads?
Yeah.
No nukes. Well, what is the size of a carrier group?
Right. Exactly.
Almost specifically, what is the size of a carrier group?
Yeah, and then
about-
and then I want you to think very hard about that day in the Pentagon when the chief of naval operations got to see all that crap play out, and then understand that he's sitting in a completely wasteful
Yes.
bathtub of rowboats
Yes.
that have no relevance in real war anymore.
Correct. So the great tragedy, the great thing that the thing that we all need to wake up to is that the only nations they can collapse right now to reset their system is our own.
Yeah.
And we're already infiltrated everywhere at every level. And we need to stop looking to the national level to solve our problems because that's not that they're doing everything they can there.
Yeah.
Right? But the
Yeah.
king can't solve your local problem. Your local lords have to. And how do they do that? The local lords have to have a very solid, understanding, mutually beneficial relationship with the people of those local communities.
Well, you got to have loyal agents. I mean, ask Stonewall Jackson how he felt about his rear echelon. So we got to clean this up because here's the thing: you at the national level, there has to be sparks of accountability, and they've got to start now because the shot clocks are running out. Look, if this seditious six moment where it's all built on false war crimes, they're just going to keep escalating. They're just going to keep.
That was a declaration of war.
It was.
The
It was
agency
absolutely and it
openly
was
declared
ignored.
war.
It was totally ignored.
Well, I mean, what else are you going to do, right? I mean, now it's loyalty test. So, Colonel, I want to come back to you because you really do map these things out well, right? So, I agree with you fundamentally. Operation Gladio and your work there is actually how I came upon your stuff, and then somebody introduced us through X. Europe and the United Kingdom and the rest of the English-speaking world failed to root out this problem. How did they fail, and how can we maybe not make that same failure? We're late stage now, so it's not like we can prevent it, this infiltration, et cetera. But, how did Europe and the UK and, the British Empire specifically, how did it fail to see this and root it out? Even later when it found out it was there, and then how do we not go down that same pathway?
So you're assuming they weren't behind it completely, because
Well,
I don't make that assumption.
I do. I do actually in terms of factions, right? Factionality.
But if I go back to the late 1800s with the Fabian Society and their goal of creating one
Yeah.
world government,
Yeah.
the way they do that is from internally creating chaos. And
Yes.
so that whole chaos and control strategy of tension is the name that it was given. They control the entire countries and communities of countries through those chaos. So they actually implemented Operation Gladio themselves. There was a secret contract
Yeah,
at
I agree.
NATO.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
they
they've been occupying the English people since 1688, and they started the original Operation Gladio in the 1620s.
yes.
That then led to the beheading of the king in 1649 and to Cromwell and everything else. And then in 1688, they totally took control. When we've been occupied people, all English speaking peoples have been occupied by this parasitic Praetorian Rome 2.0 ever since. So I agree with you absolutely.
So I don't know without exposing all of that stuff and their plan. And they specifically talked about how long it was going to take.
Yeah.
That they were not in any hurry to do any of
Yeah.
it. It was through gradualism that they were going to affect this one world government. The problem that they had, and I think the only way that you can deal with it is to take the effort that Russia did. When
Yes.
the part that a lot, yeah, the part that most people miss about the changeover of guard after in the early 1990s is they were basically in bed with the last stages of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
They're going to collapse the Soviet Union. All of the Western oligarchs are going to rush in there and buy
Yeah.
up all of the resources, pennies on the dollar, and then they will occupy Russia. And the Fabians said that they were going to cut off Russia, split it apart in their world government format.
Like Kaya Kallas today.
Yeah. So if you look at that, and the only thing that saved Russia as a country was Vladimir Putin. He is the one that exposed the Browards and Safra, the funder guy, from going in and doing that. And of course, now we have the Magnitsky Act because that entire thing was lied about as well. But what Putin did was he kicked them all out. And he said, you're not allowed here anymore.
Okay.
You're not allowed to operate here. You have to leave.
If I might qualify one thing there, Colonel, because I fundamentally agree with you, but it wasn't one man. It was the
True,
Russian power
true.
system, the Russian,
Yeah.
it was some of the Russian
He
oligarchs.
was the leader. Yes.
He was the leader, and he's extraordinarily capable. I totally give you that. But we need to be careful. It's not one man, because we
True.
need to not look to one man here. It was the Russian people who said,
Correct.
we just came through communism. We're not going to go through this, in this other, we're not
Yes.
going to get destroyed. We who survived communism are not going to do this. So terribly sorry.
Yeah.
But
And so I think that's the model. I mean, you see it with Viktor Orban in Hungary. I think that's the model. And I think that's exactly what President Trump is doing. He is getting out all of these forces out of the United States that are the stay behind units in our country. He is cutting off the illicit trafficking into the United States with the border. We are so infiltrated, though. We didn't catch it as close as what Russia did. So ours is going to be a lengthier process. But what I see happening in the first 12 months of his administration is every single thing on my checklist that I knew had to be severed in order for us to have a chance.
Yeah, so Colonel, I totally agree with you. Here's the thing this is where it gives me concern, is that they learned from their failure, and Blaine and I disagree on the second one I'm going to say here, but they failed in Russia because the Russians stayed homogeneously Russian and fell back on their civilization that didn't get wiped out, was kept by the mothers, right? The mothers of the Russian peoples. The Chinese did the same because the Chinese were being parsed up when I was there in the early 2000s. China was being parsed up again by all these foreign oligarchs, creating local Chinese oligarchs who weren't loyal to the Chinese people. They were loyal to money. The China hustle was going on where, we look at China as China made, $100 trillion in the last 30 years. The truth of the matter is 70 trillion of that went right back out of the country in the form of, listings on foreign exchanges, banking, fee transactions and all this other stuff, speculation, et cetera. And an artificial real estate bubble in ghost cities, which I've seen with my own eyes, right? Entire cities for 3 million people built out of concrete with no doors and windows, et cetera. It wasn't the Chinese trying to do that to themselves. There were folks fighting it. But China is also the other thing that saved China is they stayed homogeneously Chinese, and they fell back on their Chinese civilization that also didn't get wiped out, that the mothers of China and China expats who had fled after, Mao came to power also maintained Chinese civilization and went back. And I know
Hmm.
some of them personally, right?
Yeah.
Taiwanese specifically. So they've been able to do that. Well, the Praetorians learned from that, and they've been just
Right.
flooding us with 100 million people in the United States over the last 30 years. So we have a vastly, and then we have a second problem. The second problem is that we have actually been occupied since 1688 with this whole British, which is Rome 2.0 system. And we have forgotten that we are a civilizational people and that we have a civilization to fall back on, and it is the English civilization. All of us, native English speakers from the native English speaking lands, to include the Irish, are all English civilizational peoples, and our civilization is rich and powerful and gives us the ability to work out all these complexities. And we need to fall back on it, or we're going to get wiped out.
Yeah, I
So,
can't disagree with that.
yeah. Blaine?
Yeah. I look, this is exactly where we have to be if we're going to have a chance. The United States will either rise and show the path to rebut this, and I really take your wisdom here, EM, at the local level is where we've got to be at our
Yeah,
best, our very
yeah,
best.
yeah,
But if the United States, doesn't stand up, I'm just watching Europe vaporize itself, sans a couple of stars, and so what's going to end up happening is the English-speaking peoples of the world or Western civilization,
well, it's two
well,
different things. Yeah, yeah,
they are
yeah,
two different things, but
yeah.
I don't see the English speaking peoples rising except for the United States, and I don't see anybody of any muscular bicep except for the United States when it comes to Western civilization. And I do think that, and what I a lot
I
of
agree
people
with
think
that.
I'm twisted
Yeah.
on this, and you'll be even probably a little surprised, DM. Um, I thought I saw a big moment of hope this last week when Ambassador Witkoff went to Moscow and he's lining up to speak with leadership there about Ukraine. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the foreign minister from China, Wang Yi, shows up, and the three of them get to sit down behind closed doors and have a discussion that I don't want to know what they discussed. I don't
Arc.
want anybody to know what
Yeah,
they
yeah,
discussed.
yeah, yeah.
But I thought for the world, that was a very hopeful
It's
moment,
arc.
especially as Craven Europe wants
Yeah,
direct war.
yeah. Blaine, I totally agree with you. I think arc has already happened. I think
I
it's
think
already
ARC is
happened.
happened. It's happened. Yeah, I think
And
it has happened.
I think specifically what's been happening for the last probably 2, 3 years, carefully until the administration came into power, to be within laws legally, right? To not give the gap to be used, exploited. I think since the Alaska meeting and the Southeast Asian meeting here with Xi Jinping, I think we've been doing intel sharing, high-level intel sharing
Yeah,
on these Devil's Legions, the
makes
Praetorian
sense.
systems. I think we've been sharing the intel about who they are and with receipts, right? So none of this is being done suppositionally or et cetera, because three great powers engaged in an all-out war for survival. Because if the United States goes down, the entire world devolves into war,
So, do you
period.
think it
Mhm.
was any coincidence at all that that same week, now you see the European leaders shifting and saying, well, we want to go to war with Russia, but the
Yes.
real enemy at the end of the day is all China.
Yes,
And to me,
yes,
that's just a hurt feelings report about the ARC countries
yes,
meeting up.
yes. Yeah. So you know, I agree with you. The resurgence, the restoration of the English. So here's my thought. I've been writing about it for a couple of years, and I'd very much like to hear, Colonel, your thought, and Blaine, your thought, and Tommy, yours too. You've been doing a lot of these shows. A lot smarter kid than he gives on, by the way. Right? The frickin' Irish. You can never trust them. Dirty little bastards.
Act
Sneaky,
stupid. Act stupid.
sneaky, right? Um, I say that as an Englishman. Um, We are at a position where the Roman Empire was in the 300s, where we either rise as Byzantium out of, the equivalent of Byzantium out of Rome. Here would be America out of England, right? Or, America out
Right.
of the United Kingdom. And we go on and be the paragons and the champions of English civilization for the next 1,000 years till we cock it up again, right? Several times, or the English civilization gets wiped from the earth from the inside.
Right.
I think it's that. I think that's how pronounced the stakes are.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think we're there. I think we're at the end game. I think
yeah,
this is all
yeah,
the marbles time.
yeah. No, I totally agree. Tommy,
Yeah, no, it's one thing I wanted to go back to is the whole, they think they have their compound, they have their aquifers, they got their whatever, and you got your Delta Force guys. And no, it's not theirs. It's the security teams. Like that's obvious. But I think, and this is where I actually kind of find in a fucked up way, kind of like a silver lining is not just that, but one of my, if not my favorite books is Raven Rock by Garrett Graff, and it's all about the history of the continuity of government, specifically like the structural parts of it, like the literal bunkers from FDR through present day. And these are things where it's like, no, they can hold it. They do have the army. It's not six guys. They have everything. It's they have 19 backup, power supplies with their own like, subterranean, reservoir. And but even then, the guys that could hold it, I mean, almost to a person, they all have some line that gets very close to this. This is awful. I don't ever want to be here again because you're 3,000 feet below granite, it's fluorescent lighting, and it's just nothing. And those are people that can hold it. They actually do. Good luck getting there. Well, they actually can, right? They do have all the evac routes. And to what Blaine said is, they really only care when their rice bowl is threatened. I look at that and I try to just, okay, accept it as what it is. Don't label it good or bad. Just accept it as the parameters of the scenario. Even the people that can survive and they do have an army don't want to because the existence is abysmal. And okay, so what is threatening their rice bowl? How do you threaten the president's rice bowl? Well, it's the same reason. The reason we never launched, an ICBM at Russia in the 50s wasn't because of, the warmth in our heart. It's because we knew one was coming right back at us from orbit. Those two things right there, to me, in an odd way, is actually a silver lining. That it's less about can we survive a nuclear war. There's another quote in Raven Rock. I think it's whoever, like the secretary of whatever was under Eisenhower. He had a sarcastic quote saying, "We were only ever one spreadsheet away from figuring out continuity of government and survival of nuclear war." Meaning it didn't matter how many, the I's they dotted and T's they crossed. That right there, that the continued existence of, this biosphere, whether or not it, devolves into fascism or communism, I'm not even addressing that. I do think there is a built-in, almost, knock on wood, impossibility of thermonuclear Armageddon because of those two things. Even at the very, very top, they don't want, and they can survive. They don't want to because it's the most luxurious bunker is it's still a bunker.
so
And from that, I think that almost they want, and again, it's not because they're, it's not because it's world peace. They don't want to die because they also like, whatever, sitting on the porch. So now
so
that's a very low threshold to say we're at least not going to nuke each other. I'm not, by no means am I speaking on what form of government will arise from that, but I don't know. I do kind of find a silver lining in that the
okay, but
selfishness of everyone might actually guarantee a
here's
form
the problem,
faster
Tommy.
of peace.
Here's
Yeah.
the problem. What we're facing is not nuclear war,
Right.
right? What we're facing is complete replacement in our own lands by people.
Oh, I'm very aware of that. I'm
Hundreds
very
of
aware of
so
that.
hang on a second. So we might go into a civil war, hot civil war, and I don't even know what would shove them into a bunkers at some point. You go into the bunker 3 to 5 years, What are you going to do? You're going to come out and retake the frickin' land? No, the whole land's been overrun by foreigners,
Yeah.
right? People who are, so what are you going to, so the point is that, and I'm actually glad you brought this up, Tommy, because this is a fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that we have nuclear war bunker mentality in everything, in every way that we're approaching this problem. And that's not what we're dealing with. What we're dealing with is complete erasure of ourselves and our own lands, demographically, economically, financially, culturally. And you can't beat that by retreating to a bunker. You're not going to survive that. Maybe your family's going to live there. How many generations of kids are going to have in that bunker? How many generations of kids are going to be born on the surface?
Agreed. I guess my logic is, and I'll kind of frame it, and really the only experience I have is like through this podcast. Yeah, it was no bueno getting banned from YouTube and iTunes and Twitter and Snapchat and Reddit and fucking everything. Like, and it was certainly not cool to have to move over to Rumble, which I think Rumble's monthly active users are 77 million and YouTube is 2.3 billion. Yeah, real great fertile ground to grow a show that is already, going against the grain. My logic in that is it's still alive. I live to fight another day. By no means am I saying that, oh, we win because we're not in nuclear war. That it at least means we are not going to bleach the surface of the planet. That's how I'm looking at it, is live to fight another day. And the system is infinitely complex. And it can,
if you get demographically overrun,
I'm with you. No,
the planet's bleached for you and yours.
Hold up. I'd like to put some spin on the ball, please.
Yeah.
I want to put some spin on the ball. Here, Tommy, I'm sorry for the night of sleep you're not going to get.
Oh, dude, this podcast has broken me so thoroughly.
Here it comes. So, if you remember, during my military residency at the Council on Foreign Relations, I really got to meet a lot of these people and all these names. And after these meetings at night over the brandy snifters or the dram of scotch, here comes the problem. They're not that smart. In fact,
as Russ Baker said, ruthlessness and incompetence.
They're woefully ignorant of a lot of things. And so here's the problem. I listened no less to a Warburg, a young man, but a Warburg, tell me all about the way it would be if they ever had to go to bunker and how it would all work out. And the assumption sets that all of them were nodding their heads on, and these are people with billions of dollars. I get very nervous about their naivete because they make decisions based on those assumptions. And this is what could truly get us into trouble and get us hurt, is because these clowns don't understand even rudimentary base violence where that we experienced at recess on the school grounds when we were young kids. They don't get that. None of them have ever fired a gun. None of them really care about war except for death counts because they go, okay, the war's going well. They don't understand Mad Max world. They don't even come close to understanding it. And so my worry is they look at Zuckerberg. He just bought himself a $212 million bunker in Maui, and he thinks it's all there. It's going to be fine. No problems for me. He assumes things, and they don't even make the leap of what you're saying, which bothers me. You're saying the Mad Max existence that they would have on the other side of this thing is what deters these people, and I'm telling you they can't envision it.
They don't. The Warburgs are even worse because not only do they have tens of billions, they actually have an entire country.
It's true. That's right.
An entire country, and they still misunderstand this.
That's right.
As a broad umbrella, Blaine, would it be fair to say that theme of people, the detached, whatever, that they've run civilization really from, the agricultural revolution till now? I mean, just in general, like the idea of a detached elite.
Oh, far before that. That. I like that term, the detached elite. But they see, this is the problem, is all that money, all that wealth, all that silver spooning, all the reaffirmation of all the prep schools, all the soccer trophies that you deserve to win and the all-star everything, and look how brilliant you are. They believe that in themselves. So when you see one of them step out on that stage and we're all going to have a CFR roundtable about X, they speak with what they think is music to everybody's ears. And what you see around the room is everybody politely biting their lip as hard as they can to not acknowledge what adult they have in front of them who's spewing nonsense.
Isn't that
That's how
something
bad
about
it is.
an emperor in his clothes?
That's right.
Right. So here's the thing I think maybe we kind of close out on, right? And unless you guys want to continue, but I'm terribly sorry, I'm gonna have to jump here. Um, go ahead and retreat into your bunkers. Go ahead and actually survive that. The rest of us are going to fight it out on the surface. And if we win, you're never back in power again when you come out of your bunker. In fact, I'm probably going to use some thermals. And I'm going to go concrete up every freaking exit hole for your freaking bunker. That's if I don't crack the door, go in and get supplies and leave you dead on the floor. That's the reality of the world. When elites become this detached from their people and from reality, they're done.
Yeah.
They are completely and utterly done. Now, how that comes about, whether they get wiped out by an invading army, which happens, or they retreat somewhere and go into exile, which has happened, they are never in power again because the ones who stood and fought, if they prevail, will never let these people have anything whatsoever to do with power again, and will never allow them access to the assets that their wealth is based off of. Why? Because they didn't stand and fight for it. We did. It's not their assets anymore.
Well,
It's
and to
not
make
their,
an example out of them, the
yeah,
violence will be egregious. It will be Genghis Khan level stuff. Because if you remove our societies, if you remove our civil societies, in a microcosm. You saw some of that in Tahrir Square when the Arab Spring came down. If you
yeah,
take
yeah,
away my
yeah,
ability to feed my
yeah,
kid and I got to
yeah,
watch her die from a famine, then
yeah.
what's to stop me from grabbing this AK and going and lighting up everybody? And that's where the surface dwellers who have to fight this out will be. And so it'll be heads
Isn't
on
that
pikes time. Our
isn't it?
favorite general there, EM
Yeah.
Subadai.
Yes. So what I wonder if H.G. Wells wasn't trying to tell us this back in the 1800s with the Enoch and the Morloi.
That's a good point. That's a
Is it?
very good point.
I think he was trying to tell us this. And then what happened? The Morlocks were really in control.
Yeah.
We've seen this play out. If you go back and you look at some of the, like, go back to World War II, where some of the people that were in countries like Korea, and where they fled and they didn't fight. They didn't fight the Japanese. And then what happened, especially in Korea, they bring back a leader, and I use air quotes for that, who didn't stand and fight. They were never respected. And what did the powers to be have to do? They had to build up an army and an intelligence apparatus to surround that.
To keep them in power. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so history has played out in our lifetimes
Yes.
to tell you exactly the point that you just made. It has happened over and over again. They're trying to do it right now in Iran.
Yeah. Yeah.
By putting the Shah's son back in there.
Yeah.
He will not stand a minute because he didn't stay and
Correct.
fight.
Correct. They're doing it in American states right now. They're trying to build, state level law enforcement and intelligence capabilities, and they've been doing it for decades around Gavin Newsom and Waltz and these other, Hochul and these others.
Yeah.
If there a real fight happens in those states, those people are going to flee in an instant.
Yes.
And then they'll go into exile, right? Leader in exile. And then absolutely to your point, at some point on the other side of the conflict, depending on who wins the conflict, they'll try and put them back in there.
Yes.
And then they'll have to use, draconian measures for them to have any validity, any value at all. The issue is in the English speaking world, at least in the English speaking world, unlike European and et cetera. Whenever our leaders have gone into exile, they've done so in an actual no shit bloody fight. And there was the only ones that we invited back, Bonnie Prince Harry types. The only ones we invited back were the ones who had stood and fought and had lost, and there was no other choice for them but to go into exile. And then we brought them back, and they still had to earn it in the modern time, but they came back with the respect of the people.
Correct.
Yeah.
and I know you got to run EM, but the only
Yeah,
point I
yeah.
want to make back to Blaine talking about this is I don't doubt at all these people are detached and their assumptions and blah blah blah. But if we're gonna say just loose, and I understand that there's a massive disparity now because there are nuclear weapons, it is disproportional. It's not, knights in armor. But wouldn't we have seen the entire Earth scorched metaphorically or literally at some point in the past 10 millennia? If we're saying that the detached elites have always run it, but
No.
now we're oh no, I just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but we're
Yeah.
saying and I don't give a shit. Don't take
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I don't care about any of
yeah.
this. Well, I mean, I care about it. I don't care about my opinion on it. Is but we're saying no, this one's different. They actually believe they can win. That I feel like it would have happened by now.
Okay. Let's go down just a couple of things in the Cold War. It almost happened
Sure.
more times than I can count on my fingers. That we were very, very close to the miscalculation that was taking
Oh
us
yeah,
to
the
the other
training
place.
tapes they put in NORAD
Oh,
at
sure.
Qs instead
In
of
fact,
zeros.
I would refer everybody to a recent movie made in France, but it's in English on Amazon Prime called The Wolf's Call. I discussed this with John Batchelor last night. But
1983, Able Archer.
Yep, yep. But what I would say is that the technocrats, the ones that EM was talking about, the technologists, they are convincing the elites that we're now at an intersection of AI,
Yes,
robotics, and
yes,
quantum that makes us redundant. So when
yes,
they talk about
yes,
depopulation, they seriously mean it.
Okay.
And they've convinced themselves that the AI is good enough and that
yes.
the quantum is good enough and the robotics will all replace us. And all they have to do is bunker in. And when they come to surface, it'll be this beautiful world with not many people, but servants that are
Correct. Garden of
all
Eden.
AI driven.
Yeah,
And this is the dangerous thing. They believe it.
yeah,
Got it.
Yes.
Okay, no,
yeah.
that
So,
makes sense. Whereas in the
so
past
let
it
me
would
give.
be on in the past it
Yeah,
would
yeah,
be
yeah.
we assume it, but we have to keep the peasants alive. It's now it's
Correct.
they believe, regardless if they can, they believe
Correct.
that the robots and the quantum and the AI can do it.
Yeah,
So now they're really drunk now and they really think that they're gonna drive home and they're not gonna get caught. And it's like they're drunker than they've ever been in a car that's faster
correct.
than they've ever driven.
That's an
Correct.
apt
That's a
And the
great
other,
way
analogy.
of putting it.
yeah, and the other, if I might, the other piece is that, and this is why multipolarity really matters, is that you do always have some great peoples or principalities that aren't led by morons who are disconnected. So we were probably half a day away from nuclear war in 2022 when the Ukrainians and the Brits were trying to do a dirty nuke in Zaporozhye.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
who came and who stepped forward? The Russians, because the Russians, who are not disconnected or
Yeah.
detached
It was
whatsoever,
obvious. It
the
was
Russians have been
obvious.
that's exactly right. The Russians
Yeah.
have been tracking component pieces coming
Finish.
out of different parts of the world from the very beginning. They watched and tracked certain engineers who had certain backgrounds and experience. They looked at Intel people and they mapped and tracked all of it. They didn't move against it. They called a UN Security Council emergency session and they put all the frickin' intel, the receipts on the table. And the British and the Ukrainians and the Americans, unfortunately, had to back away. We were that close to nuclear war 3 years ago,
Yep.
not in the 60s, not in the 80s, 3 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
right? And they tried it again. They tried another
And it
freaking
always
attempt.
models the same. There's no such thing as attack nuke, and it just stays there. They
Correct, correct.
all model and war game out the same.
Yeah,
One suitcase nuke, everything goes.
that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Eric Schlosser's book Command and Control, it ends with nuclear bunkers and he's like, and by the way, the Cold War ended. These are all still there. Every
Yeah.
bunker is pointed at the
Yes,
sky I think he says
yes,
like a gun cocked with a megaton
yes,
bullet and they work. That's the last one and they work.
yes.
And that's the end of it's like, yeah, dude. Oh, the red scared duck and cover. We're there. It never went away. It's all the shit's
Well, look
still
what NATO
there.
just put out. A book got written by a German with an Italian name. That's funny. Carlos Garza, or yeah, Carlos Garza, I think is his name. He wrote the book If Russia Wins, and it's a an exercise in red teaming. What happens after Russia wins the Ukraine war, and how is it going to look? Now, here's the danger. The European leaders are now convincing themselves that this book is a Bible. And
Yes.
this guy completely
Yes.
gets it. And
Yes.
I guess then we're going to have to think differently about preempting Russia. They're using this foil
Yeah.
to get on this preemption kick. And again, you're looking at the mother of all liquidity crises and bubbles blowing apart. They're going to have a bag man. That guy's name is Putin.
Well, they're
Yep.
looking at 5 centuries worth of stolen wealth getting wiped out because the Ponzi's come undone.
You said it far better. That's correct.
That's what they're looking at. What would they do for that? And the other piece is they've convinced all the lowbrows that climate change is real and that
Right.
people need to get wiped out because the planet.
Yeah.
So, and it very much to what you said earlier, they're all in on nuclear war.
Yeah.
They're all in.
Yeah. They are.
Well, as always, I leave these episodes with nothing but great hope for tomorrow. And
We're going to be here tomorrow. That'll be all right.
yeah, no, I mean, yeah,
Day after tomorrow, sketchy.
yeah, yeah. And, I guess we'll end with a Terrence McKenna quote. The dash to the stars doesn't come from a peaceful planet. It comes when everything goes haywire and hits a fever pitch. This might just be the puberty of civilization. You might look at a trillion other planets and go, yeah, it always kind of gets hairy right at the end, and then it goes. So I don't know, or not, or I'm just gonna die in nuclear hellfire tomorrow. But whatever. That neither of which are an excuse for people not to subscribe. So please follow me.
To dust you shall return.
Yeah, man, it's all get good with God. It's all it ever is. But we'll wrap this up. All of you guys, thank you so much for your time. And
Appreciate it.
yeah,
Thanks much, Tommy.
it was
Nice to meet you.
you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You as well, Colonel. And EM, you showed up late. You can't. That's strike one.
Let's not
It
get
is.
to, you know what? Hopefully, I don't get to strike 3 before nuclear annihilation.
See, he's mad at YouTube, but he's adopting their methodology.
Yeah,
You got one strike.
There we go.
All
There
right,
we go.
guys.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
We'll
you.
wrap this up,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you so much for the
Bye.
time out of your day. Everybody watching, thank you. Hey guys, real quick, you guys know Basil Baz, ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. I just did a fundraiser with them the other day, and I'm going to put this on to every episode I do. They are special forces veterans who physically rescue trafficked children. They have since 1993. They have a 100% success rate. They do not take salaries. They all have day jobs, and they literally rescue sex trafficked children. Donations to them are a tax write-off. I get nothing from them, and they have not asked me to put this on. I've included this little clip on episodes for the last year or so, and I'm just re-recording it because I just got to meet him just 2 days ago for future. It's November 25th, 2025, but this will be on every episode now for the next year. And there is nothing better you can do with your money. If you can support them for even $5, please do that. They truly are doing the Lord's work, and I think we all have an obligation to do that. Thank you so much.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a Blue Room soon. www.blueroom.com.
Hey guys, a huge sponsor of the show is Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. Clayton lives down in Georgia. He's been on the show before. It's actually nearby where I went to college. They are a huge sponsor of the show. They give me some money every month, even when I don't sell enough to warrant that paycheck, meaning that the show is not free. It's just that it's free for you. If you guys need prepper food or if you're just interested in supporting the show, I'd please ask you to go to the link in the description. Go to Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, promo code TPC for 10% off. 72 servings per pail, 25-year shelf life. These things are, they double as dumbbells. Pasta Primavera, cheesy potato soup, mac and cheese, loaded baked potato casserole, chili mac, cheddar broccoli soup, cheesy lasagna, teriyaki rice. You can get banana chips. There's also raspberries, strawberries, and apples. There's a bunch of freeze-dried fruit, or you can even get seeds to plant your own garden. It's not a bad thing to have. It's like gold or ammunition. It's a good thing to have. It's a bad thing if you have to use it, but it's good. It's good to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. So that's what I'd say. And if you just want to support the show, please go to the link in the description. Please go support them because they support me. Thank you so much, guys.